Chapter 11. The Withdrawal Mock-up. The reboot was not clean. There was no chime, no spinning wheel, no orderly loading of drivers. There was only a violent, gasping return to consciousness that felt less like waking up and more like drowning in reverse. Arthur Vane opened his eyes. He was not in the St. Regis. He was not surrounded by gold leaf and marble. He was lying on the linoleum floor of his basement kitchenette, curled around the base of the refrigerator like a parasitic vine. He was still wearing the tuxedo, though the shirt was torn at the shoulder and stained with a dark, crusty substance that smelled of red wine and bile. Timestamp check. He tried to lift his wrist to check his watch, but his arm felt like lead. He managed to turn his head toward the microwave clock. 4:14 p.m. Sunday. Arthur closed his eyes. The last data point he possessed was Friday night. The bathroom stall. The handful of pills. He had lost 40 hours. Corrupted file segment his mind supplied weekly. Unrecoverable. He peeled himself off the floor. His joints clicked dryly. His head throbbed with a rhythmic, dull pressure, as if his brain had swollen too large for the skull. He limped to the desk. He needed to assess the damage. His phone was dead. He plugged it in. When the screen illuminated, the notifications cascaded down like a waterfall of failures. 14 missed calls, Miller. 3 missed calls, Elena Rostova. 1 text message. Miller, yesterday, 10:03 a.m. Arthur opened the text. Miller, Elena smoothed it over. Told Thorne you had a reaction to seafood. Go home. Take the week off. We need to talk on Monday. Arthur stared at the screen. Reaction to seafood. It was a clumsy lie, efficient only in its vagueness. He wasn't fired. Not yet. He looked at the plastic organizer tray on his desk. It was empty. He had consumed the entire weekend's allocation in a single mouthful on Friday night. A wave of nausea rolled over him. Not physical nausea, but an intellectual revulsion. He had lost control. He had allowed the chemical variables to dictate the outcome. He had become inefficient. Arthur Vane did not tolerate inefficiency. Diagnostic required, he croaked. He needed to prove to himself that he was the operator, not the machine. He needed to prove that the medication was a tool he could pick up and put down at will. Hypothesis. The aphasia and the blackout were caused by toxicity, an accumulation of metabolites. Proposed protocol. System flush. 0 intake for 72 hours. Reset the baseline. He walked to the bathroom. He looked at the spare bottles hidden under the sink. I am not an addict, he told the mirror. I am a project manager running a stress test. He slammed the cabinet door shut. T-12 hours. Monday, 4 a.m. The first sign was the temperature. Arthur woke up freezing. He was wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, buried under 2 comforters, but he was shivering so violently his teeth clattered together. Thermoregulation failure, he noted, pulling the blanket tighter. He sat up. Immediately, the cold vanished, replaced by a suffocating wave of heat. Sweat poured out of his pores, soaking his clothes in seconds. He kicked the blankets off. Then he was freezing again. He went to the kitchen to make coffee. His hands were shaking. Not the high-frequency vibration of the caffeine, but a coarse, jerky tremor. He dropped the spoon. He tried to pick it up, but his fingers wouldn't coordinate. Motor control degradation. He drank the coffee. Tasted like battery acid. He sat at his computer to work on the back-end code, trying to get ahead of the conversation with Miller. He couldn't focus. It wasn't the fog of the gabapentin. It was the opposite. It was a hyper-awareness of everything. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a jet engine. The light from the monitor was searingly bright. The tag on the back of his shirt felt like sandpaper rubbing against raw nerves. Sensory gating failed. All inputs at maximum volume. T-minus 24 hours. Monday, 4 p.m. The flu arrived. Arthur was curled up on his futon. He was convinced he had contracted a virus. It had to be a virus. His stomach was cramping in violent, rhythmic spasms. He had vomited 3 times clear, acrid fluid. His bones ached. A deep, marrow-level throb that made it impossible to lie still. But the worst part wasn't the pain. It was the fear. It wasn't anxiety about his job or Elena. It was a chemical, primal sense of impending doom. It felt like the air pressure in the room had dropped, like the moments before a tornado touches down. He felt a terrifying urge to run, to jump out of his skin. Akathisia, his memory supplied the term. A movement disorder characterized by a subjective feeling of inner restlessness. He stood up. He paced the small room. For steps turn. For steps turn. He couldn't sit. If he sat, the screaming in his nerves got louder. Just the flu, he whispered. Just a virus. He looked at the cabinet under the sink. If it's the flu, his logic whispered, then taking the gabapentin won't help. It interacts with calcium channels, not influenza A. But if you take it and the flu goes away... No, Arthur said. 72 hours. That is the protocol. T-minus 36 hours. Tuesday, 4 a.m. Arthur was hallucinating. It wasn't visual. It was auditory. He heard a phone ringing. Ring, ring, ring. He crawled to his desk. He checked his phone. The screen was black. Ring, ring, ring. It was in his head. A phantom signal. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. His brain, deprived of the massive doses of GABA it had grown to expect, was firing uncontrollably. Electrical storms were raging across his cortex. He lay on the floor. The carpet smelled of dust and despair. He tried to calculate the half-life again. Gabapentin, 7 hours, elimination. He couldn't do the math. The numbers slid off the whiteboard of his mind. He realized then, with a moment of crystalline horror, that he was stupid. Without the pills, he wasn't the genius architect. He was a shivering, sweating animal on the floor. The high IQ was just potential energy. Without the chemical catalyst, it was inaccessible. The pain in his leg, the sciatica that started it all, returned with a vengeance. It felt like a hot iron rod was being driven into his spine. He gasped, curling into a ball. "Please," he whimpered. To no one. He couldn't do 72 hours. He was going to die. He felt his heart fluttering in his chest. A chaotic, thready rhythm. Arrhythmia. If I don't stabilize the system, I will suffer a catastrophic hardware failure. It wasn't addiction, he rationalized desperately. It was life support. You don't call a diabetic an addict for needing insulin. You don't call a diver an addict for needing air. Arthur crawled toward the bathroom. It took him 5 minutes to cross the 15 feet of floor space. He dragged his body like a wounded soldier. He reached the sink. He wrenched the cabinet door open. He grabbed the spare bottle. His hands were shaking so bad he couldn't get the cap off. He smashed the bottle against the porcelain of the sink. Crack. The orange plastic shattered. Yellow capsules spilled into the wet sink. Arthur didn't count them. He didn't check the spreadsheet. He pressed his face into the sink, licking the capsules up like a dog. He chewed them, swallowing the plastic and the powder. 1, 2, 4, 6. He slumped back against the bathtub, shivering, waiting. He waited for the shame. But as the first wave of chemical warmth hit his stomach, as the cotton began to wrap around his screaming nerves, as the doom began to recede, he didn't feel shame. He felt loved. The drug was the only thing that loved him. The drug was the only thing that worked. Arthur closed his eyes. The phantom phone stopped ringing. Protocol failed, he whispered into the silence. System restored.